think global, act local has never been more opportune in terms of the world where financial institutions and the big mega corporations and the market have collapsed, and we need that form of politics to ensure that we don't have a complete meltdown. But actually underneath it, and this is really what I wanted to say this morning, underneath that is the real world in which people live out their lives. And whatever we do in terms of restoring the global economy and the decisions taken in Westminster yesterday and being taken across the world, it's actually underpinning that, filling the vacuum in our social and civic and civil lives that will be the real make or break. People, against all the odds over the years to come, are going to have to come together and build on what's already there, reinvent those mutual societies, re-engage in bigger numbers in terms of helping each other. In other words, to find solutions to our immediate problems for ourselves, rather than expecting someone else to do it for us. Of course you can't do it on your own. We need government to put the resources, the backing, the commitment. We need local government and civil servants to understand that the voluntary sector and volunteering is not a substitute for doing things in a more traditional way, but an absolutely crucial adjunct and support system to it. And I just want to say one or two things about that, because you're reinventing local government in Northern Ireland with the 11 authorities replacing the 26. I think we need continuity of funding, and we need consistency, and we need policies that are about engaging people in every part of their life, whether it's at work or in the community, whether it's faith groups or whether it's those who are giving of their time in the trade union movement and formal politics. But we need to understand as well that as we change the terms of reference, we don't end up with a new bureaucracy. See, on the mainland, we've had this new jargon of commissioning and contracting for some time. And what's happening with commissioning is that people are asking the voluntary sector to provide services that those who are commissioning already know about. In other words, they're commissioning what already exists or they believe exists. Whereas actually what we need in terms of enterprise and innovation, the social enterprise that many of you are engaged in, is to commission and grant aid and support what is possible for tomorrow, not simply what we did yesterday. So we need that imagination, we need that creativity, we need you to be using the power of the voluntary sector to be able to innovate in entirely new ways. And we need a compact that ensures that local and assembly government and the executive are backing and supporting people's innovation and enterprise on the ground, not stifling it. To do that, we need people in public office, just the politicians, but officials at every level, to actually be willing supporters of volunteering and voluntary action, and the third sector, as it's called, rather than actually fearing it. There is still an enormous bureaucratic fear of what does this mean if we let go of the reins? What will it mean if we actually give people risk money? If we actually take a risk with what's happening? And we're concerned, of course, with the audit process because it's our money, but we let people have a go. That creativeness that you're talking about here today has to be built into the system. And I find everywhere I go that there's still a reluctance to do so, that people are still not being engaged in designing policy, in making policy, and not just in fitting in where other people feel there's a gap. So social enterprise, mutuals, cooperatives, people giving of themselves, all of this is really important, but it has to be seen as part of building that new civic society which holds us together. Now, to motivate people to do that is the big challenge. And it really does involve leadership skills. It's a few years now since I came to join with the Ulster People's College in looking at the leadership programme across the divide that they were involved in. And I went back and both at education and employment and later at the Home Office, to get some of those leadership programmes off the ground and Leadership Academy in the UK. We're still miles off doing it properly. Spotting talent, nurturing people who have got a spark but just need that extra confidence building, that extra input to actually make it possible for them to do the job. And I hope that from today you might feel a way in which you could guide us on the best way of spotting that talent, of encouraging people in their own lives to believe they can do it, and above all, to stop the bureaucracy killing it off. You see, the one thing we don't do is to reinvent formal executive or local government committee meetings in our own neighbourhoods and communities. You know, the one thing that I found when we were devolving services into the neighbourhood when I was leader of Sheffield City Council was the wonderful way in which the bureaucracy managed to produce the same volume of papers for small neighbourhood meetings that they were producing for our policy meetings and budget meetings. And of course, 3-inch thick pieces of gumph for people who have just decided to give up a little bit of their time to contribute to developing and working with and building the social capital and the capacity of community is a sure way of killing off their enthusiasm and motivation. Apart from anything else, actually reading it was always designed as a way of ensuring that politicians didn't really know what was going on in the bureaucracy in the first place. So I always used to turn to the recommendations and then work backwards. But it's absolutely crucial that we don't reinvent what we do in the formal when we're dealing with the informal, because the challenge is going to be enormous. If we're going to value people, and the value of people is what we're talking about today, we've got to understand that we've got other challenges on top of the immediate economic and unemployment worries that we have. We've got an ageing population, we've got changes in our social life, which means that family and community are increasingly breaking down and dysfunctionality occurs in new ways. And there is no political and top-down solution to that. That is very much about reinventing the old ways of coming together and working together. And if there's an example of that happening in the United Kingdom, it is of course here in Northern Ireland. And all I wanted to just say at the end is that I think that you've got a hell of a lot now going for you, because people are committed, energised to coming together to make it work. We need to learn from what you're doing and energise ourselves across the UK. But we also need to understand that it is fragile, that people need the support to actually make the support systems work on the ground. They need to know that they're valued. They need to know that what people are doing in giving their time isn't taken for granted, but is seen as building those most important assets of all, the community assets that keep us going through the most difficult times. And I've been very pleased in pulling together a document for Gordon Brown called Mutual Action, Common Purpose. It took us longer to design the title than it did to write the document. But it sums up, in my view, what we need to do. And it puts forward a whole range of recommendations, some of which are already beginning to be implemented from the Westminster Parliament. If we can get this right, we don't need to worry about the future, because we'll have reinvented a different form of community politics. A community politics which springs from all those years ago of the Athenian polis, of people recognising that as citizens we have rights, but as citizens we are only really allowed and permitted to hold our heads up as human beings if we have those duties and responsibilities writ large in terms of what we do to each other and what we do from the family into community. And that's why I'm so proud to be here this morning. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for what you're all doing.